In this series, we've been looking at one of the original disciples of Jesus Christ, the Apostle Peter. As we look at Peter's life, we're seeing how a disciple of Jesus lives out his discipleship. Today, we're going to look at one of the most well-known events in Peter's interaction with Jesus. And I'm sure you've read or heard this story many times. So let's read it again. It's in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 14. We'll start with verse 25. During the fourth watch of the night, Jesus went out to them walking on the lake. When the disciples saw him walking on the lake, they were terrified. "It's a ghost," they said, and cried out in fear. But Jesus immediately said to them, "Take courage, it is I. Don't be afraid." "Lord, if it's you," Peter replied, "tell me to come to you on the water." "Come," he said. Then Peter got down out of the boat, walked on the water, and came toward Jesus. But when he saw the wind and he was afraid, and beginning to sink, cried out, "Lord, save me." Immediately Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. "You have little faith," he said, "why did you doubt?" And when they climbed into the boat, the wind died down. Then those who were in the boat worshipped him, saying, "Truly you are the Son of God." There are many lessons which can be discussed when examining this story, but I want to narrow the focus and talk about taking risks as a disciple of Jesus. People just don't walk on water. Peter took a big risk when he climbed out of that boat walking toward Jesus. There are some inherent risks in being a disciple of Jesus Christ, especially if he calls you to a specific ministry. Sometimes you have to step out of your boat of comfort or your boat of security or your boat of familiarity if you're to go and do what Jesus would have you do and go where Jesus would have you go. This morning, to help us with our message, I've asked 4 friends to share their personal story of some of the risks they took when Jesus called them to a deeper level of service. Let me have them introduce themselves and tell you where they are serving the Lord right now.
Hi, my name is Gary Emmons. I'm the associate pastor here at Christ Church.
My name is Chad Pace. I am the children's pastor at Christ Church at Fountain Hills.
I'm Dale Lawrence, and I'm the Executive Director of Arizona Reservation Ministries out in Globe. We work on the St. Carlos Apache Reservation.
Hi, my name's Mike Buckta. My family and I are serving as missionaries in Santo Domingo, Ecuador.
The Apostle Peter was just a fisherman when the Lord called him into service. Just a normal guy with a family and a home and all the responsibilities that go with that. Let's take a look at what these 4 guys were doing when the Lord called them.
So the year was like 1987, and Pastor Don preached this sermon, "Maybe you need to step up," and I was out in the congregation just like you are today, and I was thinking, you know what, maybe I need to go that next step, and started thinking about it. I was working at actually had a business with a partner. It's an electronics business. We manufactured printed circuit boards and electronic parts. I've been there for about 10 years. At that time in '87, I've been married about 7 years. I had a little baby girl of 8 months, and I had a 2-year-old girl, and things were kind of going along well, just like you kind of expected at the age of, then I was 37.
It was early 2006 when I felt like God was calling me into full-time ministry, and Jamie and I have been married for about 11 years. We had 3 kids. Our kids at the time my daughter was a teenager and our boys were very young. And most of my career had been in the finance industry as an executive, and I'd really gotten tired of that after a while. I'd been in the rat race, if you will, for a long time, and had changed careers about 4 years before I got into ministry. I was working in the auto industry. At first was a horrible fit for me, but eventually found a home as an auto broker. And as I finally kind of got into the groove of doing that, I actually did very, very well at it. I did better than, financially, did better than I'd ever done as an executive.
Back in 1989, I was working for the Phoenix Fire Department. I was a paramedic firefighter on the hazardous materials team. I'd been with the department about 9 years. And at the time, we'd been married 11 years. We had 3 children. Justin was a baby at the time. And I had realized that God was calling me to do more than just being a firefighter. He wanted me to do some other work on the mission field. And we began working with the Apaches and Navajos up at the American Indian Christian Mission.
Back in 2000, I went on a mission trip to Turkey. When I got back, I just felt the calling that this is what I'd like to do with the rest of my life. At the time, I was married to my wife, Danelle, for 12 years. We had 2 children, Skylar and Nicole. They were 2 and 4. I was working at Cisco Foods as a truck driver, delivering food in the Phoenix area.
Prior to Peter walking on the water, there was this big storm that had overwhelmed them. And then they saw Jesus walking on the water. The Bible says that they were afraid. Now realize that these disciples were in the middle of this storm because Jesus had sent them there. He told them to get into the boat and to go. They end up in this massive storm. And then they think they're seeing a ghost when Jesus walks on the water toward them. You know what? Sometimes it can be a scary thing to follow Jesus. Being a disciple of Jesus isn't for sissies, especially if you're willing to take some great risks for the Lord, like Peter did. The 4 guys we've been visiting with today had to tackle some fears of their own. Let's continue their stories.
So naturally, I started thinking about, well, how, if I go into ministry, how would that possibly work? I mean, I had a manufacturing engineering degree from Arizona State University, and I'm thinking, how do I apply that? I had no Bible background, so how was that going to work? That was a major concern for me, and I had a partner. How am I going to relate with this partner? If I leave this business, we had made an agreement that we just walk. There was no buyout, there was none of that stuff. And then on top of that, I had a family. I had a 2-year-old little girl and an 8-month little girl, and Kathy, my wife, and we're living here in Fountain Hills. There wasn't any opportunities here to serve. And then on top of that, my challenge was, how do I even proceed? So there was this family component to it, there was this business component to it, and then there was this education component to it, that if I took this risk to leave my profession, I was totally dependent upon God because I had no clue how He was going to work this through.
Probably my greatest fear, if you will, or concern was personal finances, and that was only really from a flesh standpoint. At the time, I was doing very well as an auto broker, and so I was looking at a 50 to 60% pay cut to get into ministry, and so that was a big challenge for me, was the financial end of it. But at the same time, it was also a sense of peace for me because we had gone through some pretty hard financial times, and it was a time that we really started turning our life over to God, and God had done some really amazing things in our life, and so there was a real sense of peace, though, at the same time with that. So when I thought with my flesh, definitely personal finances was a big concern, but when I really looked into my soul and where God was leading me, I really just had a good sense of peace about it.
The greatest concern I had when I felt the call to go into ministry was providing for my family, providing financial income for them, providing for the medical and dental needs, as well as a retirement plan. And with the Phoenix Fire Department, we had all that covered real well. But going into the ministry full time, we didn't have any of that. So it took quite a while for me to come to the realization that God would take care of us better than the fire department would. And it really came down to putting things into that perspective. Who was going to take care of me better, the city of Phoenix or God? And once we put it into that mindset, it became real easy to make the decision that knowing that God is bigger than anything the fire department could ever be and can provide better than any worldly entity ever could.
The greatest concerns that I had was what's going to happen to our kids. A lot of people said you go in the mission field and your kids get messed up, their school's going to be bad. How are you going to teach them? You guys aren't teachers. That was one of our huge concerns. Another fear that I had was, what happens if we fail? What happens if the ministry doesn't go well? What happens if we come back after a year or 2 years and I've sold my house and I've given up my job? What's going to happen? That was a huge, huge fear of ours.
Jesus ended up spending 3 years with Peter and the rest of the disciples before he ascended back to heaven and gave them the task of starting the church. There's always a time of preparation when the Lord calls you. There's always some things to do to get where you are to where the Lord wants you to be. Let's go back to our 4 friends.
So the next step was prayer. So I met with Don, and we prayed, and he had no clue either how this would work, but he encouraged me. He said, hey, look, just proceed. So I did, and kind of waited and started getting involved in the church again, and within about 2 weeks, Don receives this flyer from Pepperdine University that they were doing a two-year experimental program where they would fly the professors in, and they were going to start one in Phoenix, of all places. So I called Pepperdine, spoke with the dean, and it was going to be a degree in master's in ministries, a degree, and I told him I didn't have any background in Bible, but he welcomed me into the program, and that literally started within months. So it was prayer. How did I get here? It was prayer, it was God, and it was desperation, because I had no clue of how this would work. I had to be desperate that God was involved in this.
You know, there was obviously a decision process I had to go through. I prayed about it a lot. Jamie and I prayed about it. We talked about it. We talked about it as a family. I talked to friends. I talked to family. I talked to a lot of people, and got both sides of what people thought I should do and what they thought I shouldn't do. And really, I knew where God was leading me, and I had one last conversation with a really good friend of mine named Jim, who had been in the auto industry his entire life, had just retired, and took him to lunch one day and kind of ran over the scenario with him, and he just flat out told me after I gave him everything, he said, "You're nuts if you're not going to do this." And so the next day, I really knew that that's what God was calling me to do, and the next day I came in and talked to Pastor Don and accepted the position at Christ Church.
The transition from being a firefighter to being a full-time minister and missionary, I had a little bit of things that I had to do. I was reliant on the fire department, so I had to let go of some things. I did some more education. I was going to go into administrating a boarding school and had no experience with that at all, so I took some college classes in business administration, and really spent some time trying to learn how to be a good manager and director, and that took quite a bit of a transition, a lot of different adjustments in my life. I was pretty involved with learning how to get good at doing racquetball and sports stuff, and was involved with softball and all kinds of things that were taking my time, and I really needed to readjust and focus on what God wanted me to do. So I had to let go of some of those things, and then focus on ministry, focus on becoming a better leader, and focus on becoming a better ambassador for God.
How did we get on the field? It was a long process. We wanted to be missionaries in 2000, but we finally got on the field at 2005. I went to our church and I said, hey, we'd like to be missionaries, so I just assumed that they would write a check and I'd be on my way. As it turns out, it doesn't work out that way. They made me take seminary classes, and I had to read a bunch of books. And through all that, I learned a lot of good lessons, like bowing down to authority, which I wasn't very good at. So God knew about that. And there was just a lot of things that in those 4 years that I learned that helped me later on in our ministry. So that's how we kind of got on the mission field.
I wonder if Peter ever had some second thoughts or some regrets later on in his ministry, like when he was thrown in jail, or when he was fleeing for his life, or when he was dealing with some of the issues he had to deal with. I wonder if he ever thought, man, I should have just stayed a fisherman. My life would have been so much easier. I doubt it. I don't think Peter had any regrets. But what about our four friends? Certainly they had to have some second thoughts, don't you think? They're only human. They weren't one of the 12 apostles. They're just a bunch of normal guys. Second thoughts, regrets, and if so, how do you deal with that? Let's find out.
Regrets. You know what? I'll be honest with you. Whenever you get the flesh involved, we are in a spiritual battle, God says, between the flesh and the spirit. So there's naturally a battle with my flesh. And when I see my partner flying all over the world and doing all these crazy business things and thinking about success of his business, which I left, our business, I sometimes think, wow, that would have been a different life. But then God wakes my flesh up and invades my spirit, and he shows me of all the people that I touched and the families that we were involved with here at Christ Church, and then I start looking at it as a privilege. God can choose anyone he wants. He doesn't need me. He doesn't need any of us, but we're privileged that he did call us, and he called me, and he called the staff here. So that is a privilege, and that's how I look at it every day, as God's privileging me to serve him.
Not at all. That decision was the best decision I ever made in my life, and I can look back and say that now, and my relationship with Christ has grown, my relationship with my wife and in my marriage, that has gotten better, my relationship with my family and my kids has gotten better. And I'm not saying that those things are perfect, they're not, but every day you can just see as we let the Lord lead us, we're just growing closer and closer together. So that's been a huge blessing to us. And again, not that things are perfect, but it sure is getting better every day. And if you remember, my biggest concern was financial personal finances. And within a year of me taking the job here at Christ Church, the housing bubble popped, the economy crashed, and probably the second hardest industry hit was the auto industry. So I really felt like at one part God was protecting me from that, but in another sense, I really felt humbled by the whole thing. So it was very, very eye-opening to me.
Looking back over the last 22 years, do I have any regrets? The only regret I have is that I didn't do it sooner. I realized that I probably wasn't ready to do that, and God's timing is perfect. And I wished I could have started a long time ago and done even more than what we've been able to do, and to see how God has worked in our lives has just been amazing. And I regret missing out on that in the early years of our family. But no regrets on what we've done. No regrets on relying on God instead of on the fire department. No regrets with walking away from the comforts of Fountain Hills and going into a place like up at the Mission, where we moved from a 2,000 square foot house down to a 600 square foot trailer. God has provided for everything that we've ever needed, and we relied on him. And when you trust in God and you trust him for all of your needs, the blessings that you receive are beyond anything you can really even describe. It's been an amazing run, and we're really pleased to have been part of what God's been doing.
Do I have any regrets leaving my full-time job at Cisco Foods to be a full-time missionary? Not one. Over the last 8 years, we've been in 7 years in Peru, 1 year in Ecuador here now. In Peru, we went through 4 church splits. I've been almost thrown in jail. I've been sued. I've been called the leader of Church of Satan. I've been called a false prophet. I've been called a demon, which is my favorite. So there's a lot of things that have gone on that I probably should have left, but I just love Jesus so much. And through all this, there's been a lot of fruit in the ministry too in our church in Peru. We've baptized over 1,000 people over the last 7 years. So do I have any regrets? Not one. I would do it all over again if it meant people could go to heaven.
Well, what is your boat? What is your comfort zone? What is your safe harbor? What is the Lord calling you out of? What is the Lord calling you to? Like the Apostle Peter, are you willing to take a risk for the Lord? If not you, then who? If not now, then when? Let's get one final word of advice from each of our 4 friends.
What advice would I give? I think the number one thing is be obsessed with God. That God is in every step that you're taking. He's in every word that you're expressing, and start to realize that our life is Christ in us, and start getting excited and start taking delight in the possibilities that brings to your life. So start delighting in the Lord, and then recognize that there's no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus, because Satan's going to come after you quickly, and he is going to try to talk to you and say why you're not qualified to do this, and he's going to try to discourage you, and he's going to try to set you back, and he's going to try to get you to look at all your faults. but there is no condemnation. So I guess the advice I'd give is delight yourself in the Lord, recognize there's no condemnation, and then finally just take the next step. And you can see where I really didn't know what to do, but there was a next step, and that's all you have to do. Take the next step, and God will lead you through it. So if you're thinking about that, talk with Don and pray about it, and I'd be more than happy to talk with you too.
My advice would be, don't wait. I mean, if the Lord is really calling you to do something, just go do it. Don't hesitate. Make the decision, because if God is really leading you that path, He'll take care of all of those side issues and concerns that you have. And when you're making decisions like this, you got to think that the enemy is going to come after you. He's going to attack you. He's going to tell you all the things, give you all the concerns, the reasons why you shouldn't do it, the reasons why you're not prepared for it, the things that you need to get together before that happens. And that's just not the case. If the Lord is calling you, you just go and you do it. Just like the disciples. When Jesus called the disciples, they didn't say, well, let's see if we can work it out, in about a year or two we'll decide. They dropped their nets and they followed Him right then and there. And so that would be my suggestion, is don't wait, just immediately jump in.
Well, if you're considering stepping up your commitment to serving God, whether it's just a small step of teaching a Sunday school class on a regular basis or going into full-time ministry, the main thing is to look to God and trust Him. Put your focus on Him. All the things of the world, all the things that you want, aren't really necessarily needs, and sometimes we have to focus on what's important. What are the real needs that you have, and what are your wants? And God will provide all of our needs. The amazing thing is, when you totally trust Him and rely on Him, He also provides some of those wants too, and it's been amazing to see how God has taken care of us. The other thing is, I would say, go in with your eyes open. Talk to other people who are doing it. Find out the things that they've had to deal with, the transitions they've had to make, the adjustments they've had to make in their lives, and go with full knowledge of what it's going to take to do what God is calling you to do. And then trust Him. Trust Him. Focus on God. It's all about Him. It's all about helping others come to know Him. And when you put your emphasis on Him and not on yourself, when you look at Him for all your needs, when you look to Him to provide everything that you ever needed, He's going to provide some of the wants too, and He'll bless you abundantly. The result has been He's blessed us abundantly beyond anything we could ask or imagine, and it's been an amazing experience. To really totally rely on God has been something I never would have dreamed before we started this it would be like. But it's been a real blessing, and it's been an awesome experience.
My advice for anybody that would like to be a missionary is, if you truly believe it's your calling, you just go for it. And Jesus will show you how to do it. He'll open up the doors. And thank you for that, because the world needs more Peters. So get out of the boat. Dios te bendiga, which means God bless you guys. And thank you. Bye.
I want to thank Gary, Chad, Dale, and Mike for sharing with us this morning. And I want to encourage you. If the Lord is laying it on your heart to do something for Him, go for it. It might be working in the nursery, or working with our children or our teens, or hosting one of our life groups. It might be going on a short-term mission trip. It might be getting consistently involved in any number of service projects that we do. It might even be full-time ministry or mission work. Is the Lord calling you to step up to the next level? Philippians chapter 4 verse 19 says, "And my God will meet all your needs according to His glorious riches in Christ Jesus." God is going to take care of you. Our four friends found that out through their own experiences. God took care of them. He'll take care of you too. 1 Thessalonians chapter 5 verse 24, "The one who calls you is faithful, and He will do it." What a great statement. He will do it. You can count on it. God bless you, and thanks for listening this morning.